My name is Arya. I'm 45 years old, a mother, a civil engineer, and a woman who has always believed that structure, physical or emotional, should be built on something solid. Yet last week, the very people who were supposed to share that foundation with me proved just how fragile it had always been. My daughter, Maya, 17, thoughtful, reflective, more comfortable with a sketchbook than with loud people, was left in the middle of the Arizona desert by my own mother and my younger sister. Not on purpose in the cartoon villain sense. No, what they did was more insidious. They abandoned her out of carelessness, that casual cruelty that masquerades as just how our family is. To understand how we got to that horrifying moment, you'd need to understand the dynamic I grew up with, the one I foolishly believed I could shield Maya from. My mother, Eleanor, has always walked through the world as though she ruled over an invisible kingdom. Age to her automatically equals wisdom and authority. Contradicting her is treated as an act of war. My sister, Sharon, learned that early and built her life around Mom's approval. She's always been the favored one, a role she accepted with the same ease that she dismissed my existence. And then there's Maya, my quiet, intuitive, artistic girl. She is nothing like Sharon's loud, attention-hungry sons. Whereas they demand space, Maya drifts softly around the edges, watching, absorbing, thinking in shades most people refuse to see. My family never understood her silence. They never tried. To them, quietness was a flaw, something to be corrected. It showed up in little moments, the ones you can't pinpoint when they happen, but later form a pattern so painful you wonder why you ignored it. Like Maya's 16th birthday. She had saved for months for a professional drawing tablet. I helped her with the last bit, and her joy when she finally held that box was something I wished I could freeze. Later that day at my mother's house, she opened their gift, a generic department store gift card. We didn't know what she'd like, my mother said, waving her hand as if Maya were some distant acquaintance. The boys got cars. My daughter got clearance rack money. Or the dinner a year later, when Maya timidly offered an insightful comment about a proposed city greenway project, something she'd been researching for school. My mother didn't even acknowledge her words. But 10 minutes later, when my nephew parroted almost the same idea after skimming his phone, he was praised like he had reinvented agriculture. Maya simply went quiet again, as if she'd expected it. Those moments accumulated like fine dust, barely noticeable until suddenly everything feels buried beneath it. So when my mother proposed a big family road trip to a national park, I hesitated. Maya wasn't thrilled, but she packed her armor, her sketchbook, her headphones, and 2 novels she'd read before but said she liked because the characters don't yell. That should have been my sign not to go. But I wanted to believe, stupidly, that being away from the usual setting might soften old habits. That maybe, just maybe, they might see Maya for who she is. The trip began mundanely. Long highways, endless heat, Sharon complaining about traffic and the boys glued to tablets. The tension simmered quietly until the moment everything tipped. And it all started, unbelievably, with an argument about the radio. Maya politely asked if we could switch from blaring country pop to something everyone could tolerate. Maybe a podcast. Sharon snapped that the driver picks the music. My mother chimed in, calling Maya difficult, a word they'd thrown at her for years. It spiraled quickly, from comments about her attitude, to accusations about coddling her. And then Sharon did something I still struggle to process. She jerked the car onto the shoulder, dust rising around us, and told Maya to get out and walk it off. My mother agreed. And my daughter, conditioned for years to keep the peace, complied. As the car pulled away and Maya grew smaller in the mirror, the last shred of our family's illusion crumbled. What happened next revealed just how fast a bad decision can turn into a life-threatening nightmare, and how far a mother will go when everyone else fails her. The instant Sharon pulled away, taking my mother's unwavering approval with her, something in me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. More like the muted snap of a hairline fracture finally giving way after years of pressure. In the rearview mirror, Maya stood alone on the blistering roadside, her small frame dwarfed by the endless stretch of sun-bleached desert. Her blue t-shirt stood out for a moment, and then began shrinking with every cruel second the car moved forward. For the first few moments nobody spoke. My nephews finally removed their headphones, sensing the shift in air. Kevin's eyes widened. "We're not really leaving her, right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My mother responded before Sharon could. "We're not leaving her. She just needs a moment to cool down. We'll turn around soon." Her voice, usually sharp and commanding, wavered ever so slightly, just enough to reveal she didn't truly believe what she said. I did not yell. I did not cry. The anger inside me had gone cold, settling into a dangerous, steady calm. Turn. Around, I said, each word carved from stone. Sharon's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I just need a break from her attitude. From yours too. She exhaled sharply. We'll turn around once I've calmed down. Calm down. My daughter was standing in 115-degree heat with no water, no shade, and no understanding of why the people she trusted were abandoning her. But logic never worked on my mother or sister. Only control, and right now, the steering wheel was Sharon's throne. Minutes crawled by, minutes that, in desert conditions, could be catastrophic. I watched the clock like I was watching a countdown to disaster. 3 minutes. 5. 7. The landscape offered no intersections, no soft shoulders, nothing but shimmering asphalt and towering spines of cactus. Finally, Sharon spotted a narrow dirt pull-off and jerked the wheel. The SUV lurched, sending up a cloud of dust as she executed a sloppy three-point turn. My mother exhaled, visibly relieved, as if reversing bad decisions erased their consequences. But when we retraced our path, the desert mocked us with its sameness. Every cactus looked identical. Every stretch of road could have been the last. My mother insisted she was certain Maya had been left by a large saguaro with 2 arms. Then added, or maybe 3. We drove past the point I was sure we had abandoned her. Then turned around. Then drove it again. Nothing. No flash of blue. No sign of movement. Just heat. Endless, merciless heat. Sharon's panic broke first. Oh my God, she whispered, pulling onto the gravel. Where is she? Where could she have gone? Her voice quivered, finally hollow with fear. My mother, who had defended the decision minutes earlier, now looked pale. Her hands twisted nervously around a handkerchief. She can't have gone far. Maya! Maya! She shouted uselessly out the window. Her voice swept away by the hot wind. I stepped out of the vehicle and was hit by a furnace blast of heat that stole the air from my lungs. Sweat instantly rose on my skin. In those seconds, I understood with horrifying clarity what Maya must have been feeling. I checked my phone and made calculations automatically. Dehydration timeline. Heatstroke progression. Distance she could travel under stress. She's been out here for over 30 minutes, I said quietly. If she walked the wrong direction. I didn't finish the sentence. Sharon started crying. My mother started blaming Sharon. Sharon blamed my mother. I silenced them both with a single raised hand. Enough. Their voices died instantly. For the first time in my life they looked at me, really looked at me, and saw something they didn't know how to handle. Absolute controlled fury. You two are not part of the solution, I said. You are liabilities. Give me the keys. Sharon, sobbing, obeyed. Maybe because she knew she'd gone too far. Maybe because even she was afraid of what we'd done. I didn't comfort them. I didn't make promises. I simply took the keys, called my husband, told him exactly what had happened, and drove away, leaving my mother and sister on the side of the same road where they had left my daughter. Not out of vengeance. Out of necessity. I had one task now. Find Maya before the desert claimed her. What happened next? A desperate search, a fading phone signal, and a race against lethal heat would push me into a terrifying countdown no parent should ever face. So I sped away from my mother and sister. The desert pressed in from all sides, a brutal reminder of how unforgiving this landscape could be. The sun glared down, bright enough to blur the horizon. The air shimmered. The asphalt reflected light like a black mirror. Every second ticking by on the dashboard felt like a grain of sand dropping through an hourglass I couldn't turn back over. I forced myself not to picture Maya wandering, disoriented, overheated, scared, because panic wouldn't help me. Precision would. Focus would. My engineering mind switched into emergency mode, pushing emotion into a locked box I'd deal with later. First step, call 911. My daughter has been left on the side of State Route 78. Extreme heat. No water. 17. She's been out there nearly an hour. My voice didn't shake. It was steady, stripped down to the facts. The dispatcher asked for her description. Her clothes. The approximate location. I repeated everything as clearly as possible, silently adding what I didn't say. My family did this. My own mother approved it. The dispatcher promised help, But I knew search and rescue teams could take precious minutes. Minutes Maya didn't have. Heatstroke doesn't wait. Dehydration doesn't negotiate. I needed a starting point. Direction. Something. That's when it hit me like a jolt of electricity. App. Years ago, when Maya began driving, we installed a location-sharing app so we could track one another in emergencies. She had never turned it off. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder so fast the car fishtailed. My hands suddenly trembled. Not from heat, but from the terrifying possibility that her phone battery was already dead. That I was too late. The screen loaded. And then, a single blessed ping. A small blue dot appeared on satellite view, trembling faintly between static bursts. Her phone was still on. The dot showed she had wandered north, away from the highway, into rocky terrain where the ground sloped unevenly and shadows were scarce. She was half a mile from the road, far enough to become invisible to anyone driving by. I snapped a screenshot of the coordinates and called 911 again. I have her exact location now. I'm heading toward her. The dispatcher urged me to stay put and wait for the rescue team. No, I said simply. You can follow my coordinates. I'm going in. Hung up. There was no more time for debate. I parked at the closest point the GPS allowed and grabbed the 2 largest bottles of water in the vehicle. I wrapped a spare cotton shirt around my head against the direct sun and stepped out. The heat hit like a physical blow. Sharp, smothering, relentless. The desert was silent except for cicadas buzzing somewhere out of sight. The ground radiated heat through my shoes. Each breath felt like inhaling from an oven. Hold on, baby, I whispered, more to myself than to the empty landscape. I'm coming. I followed the compass on my phone, keeping my eyes on the blued as if staring hard enough could anchor her in place. But the terrain was uneven, sloping upward and downward in unpredictable waves of rock, sand and thorny brush. 5 minutes. 15. Every minute I called her name into the vast space. Maya. It's Mom. Answer me if you can. The desert gave nothing back. A text message buzzed. Search and rescue was 15 minutes away. I didn't respond. I couldn't stop. Not now. When I reached the spot where the GPS dot nearly overlapped with my own, I felt my breath catch. She had to be here. Maya! I screamed, my voice cracking under the strain. Silence. Then, faint, fragile, nearly swallowed by the wind. Mom! My heart plunged and soared at the same time. I spun toward the sound. It came from behind a low rock formation where a narrow sliver of shade cut across the ground. I scrambled over loose stones, nearly slipping when my foot hit sand. My hands grazed harsh brush, but I didn't feel any of it. And there she was, curled under the small shadow of a boulder, knees pulled to her chest, skin flushed red with heat. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, her lips cracked. She looked up when I reached her, a tiny flicker of recognition struggling through the haze. Mom, she whispered. I got lost. I dropped to my knees beside her. I know, I breathed, pulling the water bottle open with shaking hands. You're safe now. Small sips. Slowly. Her fingers trembled as she held the bottle. Tears I didn't realize I'd been holding back slipped down my face and evaporated almost instantly in the heat. Somewhere in the distance, I finally heard it. Sirens. Help was coming, but Maya was alive because I'd found her first. But saving her was only the beginning. What happened when we returned to the road, when my mother and sister faced what they had done, would expose just how deep the fracture in our family truly went. The paramedics reached us within minutes, though it felt like an eternity. By then, Maya was sipping water in small, shaky gulps while I cooled her skin with a damp shirt. She leaned heavily against me, too weak to fully sit upright. When the rescue team arrived, their faces shifted immediately from routine professionalism to urgent concern. Severe dehydration. Borderline heatstroke, one of them said as he checked her vitals. You found her just in time. Those words dug deep into me. Just in time. A few minutes earlier, and I might have been kneeling beside a child who couldn't answer me. They loaded Maya onto a stretcher and carried her toward the ambulance waiting on the roadside. I walked beside her, my hand never leaving her arm, as though any physical distance might allow her to slip away again. Up ahead, parked behind the emergency vehicles, was my mother's SUV. My mother and sister were standing outside of it, pale and trembling, not with heat but with dread. As the paramedics rolled Maya past, my mother stepped forward, hands shaking, lips quivering with what she likely imagined was maternal anguish. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. "Maya, sweetheart." I moved instantly, blocking her path. "Stop right there." She froze, stunned. In our entire lives, I had never spoken to her with that tone. A voice stripped of emotion, carved down to raw authority. "Arya, don't be ridiculous," she sputtered. "We were worried sick. No," I cut in sharply. "You don't get to rewrite this. Not today." Sharon hovered behind her, sobbing so hard her shoulders trembled. "We didn't think she'd walk off the road. We thought she'd stay put. We didn't mean for this to stop." My voice was ice. My mother tried again, reaching toward Maya. "Let me see." I stepped in front of her, blocking her completely. "Go near my daughter," I said, "and I will have you removed." The paramedics closed the ambulance doors. The driver waved me over. "Mom, we're ready when you are." I climbed inside without looking back. The ride to the hospital was a blur of beeping monitors and whispered encouragements. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness, the four working quickly to restore what the desert had drained from her. I held her hand, brushing sweat-damp hair from her forehead. Hours passed in the emergency room. Doctors ran tests. Nurses moved quietly around us. At one point, I realized my hands were still trembling. When the doctor finally told me she was stable, I felt something inside me loosen. A steel cable pulled too tight suddenly released. Only after Maya was sleeping comfortably did I step into the hallway. That's when the sheriff found me. He was a kind-faced man with a sun-weathered uniform and a quiet seriousness that commanded respect. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I'm Deputy Ramirez. I'd like to take your statement if you're up for that." I told him everything. I didn't dramatize. I didn't soften. I didn't protect anyone. I described the argument, the heat, the decision to leave her, the distance traveled before turning back, the length of time she spent in dangerous conditions, the fact that they did drive away without her, and the medical assessment confirming life-threatening dehydration. When I finished, the deputy nodded grimly. "This is serious, ma'am. Extremely serious. Your daughter could have died." He said it without judgment, just fact. But the truth of it sat in my chest like a stone. He informed me he had also spoken to my mother and sister. Their stories matched mine in structure but were wrapped in excuses. "We didn't mean harm. We panicked. It was a misunderstanding." But the law doesn't weigh intention over outcome. "Given the situation," he concluded, "there will be an official report. Charges may be considered." Thanked him. Maybe my voice sounded calm. Maybe it sounded detached. But internally, something hardened with finality. Later, when Maya woke and whispered, "Mom, please don't let them near me again," I took her hand and said the only answer that ever existed. "I won't. I promise." That promise became the foundation for everything that followed. What came next? Lawyers, consequences, and the irreversible fracture of our family proved that the desert wasn't the real breaking point. It was merely the beginning of the fallout. Maya slept in the hospital that night while I remained in the hard plastic visitor's chair, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Every time her breathing hitched or she stirred, my heart jumped. I didn't go to the cafeteria. I didn't step outside. I didn't even check my phone until the world around us quieted down and Maya finally slipped into deeper sleep. Then the notifications buzzed. Text after text from my mother and sister. "Sharon, Arya, please tell us how Maya is. We're terrified. Mom's crying. Please call us, please." My mother, "We made a mistake. You can't shut us out. Families forgive." And then one that nearly made me laugh from sheer disbelief. "You're the one tearing this family apart by refusing to talk to us." The same people who left Maya in 115-degree heat were now accusing me of tearing the family apart. That was all I needed to block both numbers. The silence was blissful. The next morning, once Maya had been evaluated and discharged with instructions to rest and hydrate for several days, I settled her in our hotel room with movies and snacks. She looked small sitting under the thin blanket, but her eyes were clearer. Her hand squeezed mine before I left the room. "Don't talk to them," she whispered. "I won't," I promised. And I didn't. But I did talk to someone else. I went into the hotel bathroom, closed the door, and called my lawyer, Benjamin Carter, the man who handled contractual disputes for my engineering firm but also had a reputation for being a calm, relentless professional in personal matters. "Ben," I said quietly, "I need your help. My daughter was abandoned in a life-threatening situation by my mother and sister. I want immediate action. I laid out the entire story, not the emotional version but the factual one. Desert temperatures, medical records, police statements, timeline of events, years of patterns that led up to it. Ben didn't rush. He didn't interrupt. And when I finished, he exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation settling into his tone. Arya, I'm so sorry this happened, he said. What they did wasn't just irresponsible, it's criminal. What outcome do you want? That question made me pause. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want some forced reconciliation where everyone pretended this was a misunderstanding. I want protection, I said. For Maya. Permanently. Ben's voice became all business. Understood. I'm filing for a temporary restraining order on behalf of you and Maya. Given the circumstances and the sheriff's report, it should be granted quickly. He asked for the hotel name where Sharon and my mother were staying, information they'd conveniently sent in their earlier messages, not thinking it would be used against them. 2 hours later, Ben called back. I spoke to them directly. My breath caught. And Ben's tone sharpened into pure professionalism. I identified myself as your legal counsel and informed them you were seeking a restraining order due to child endangerment. When I mentioned that the sheriff's report and hospital documentation supported potential felony charges, your sister went silent. I imagined the hotel room, their fear, their confusion, the sudden realization that their actions carried real consequences. That this time they couldn't guilt, manipulate, or minimize their way out. My mother. Yes. She was in the background, Ben said. Quiet, shaken. When Sharon got back on the line, her voice was different, broken. The only thing she said was, "We understand." And then she hung up. Closed my eyes. For the first time in decades, they understood something clearly. I wasn't playing by family rules anymore. I was playing by legal ones. Within days, the restraining order was granted. Within weeks, it was made permanent. The district attorney agreed not to pursue felony charges if my mother and sister completed mandatory intervention programs and obeyed the court order for 5 years. It wasn't revenge. It was structural protection. A new foundation. One without them in it. But the true transformation wasn't legal. It happened inside my home. Maya. Me. And in the life we built after cutting out the people who had nearly cost her everything. Life after the desert didn't snap back into place. It shifted. Slowly, steadily, like a landscape cooling after a wildfire. There were charred edges, yes. But there was also room for new things to grow. Maya healed first physically. The exhaustion faded. Her appetite returned. The color came back to her face. But the emotional healing, that took longer. And it came in quiet waves, not dramatic revelations. For weeks, she stayed close, sometimes hovering near the doorway of whatever room I was in, not saying anything, just wanting proximity. When she painted, she kept her headphones on but removed only one ear cup, as though she needed to constantly confirm I was still nearby. I didn't rush her. I didn't push conversation. I simply stayed available, steady, the very thing she'd been denied for hours on that scorching highway. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the incident, I came home to find her sitting in the living room surrounded by canvases. Not small sketches. Large, bold, full-color pieces. I stopped in the doorway, stunned. They were all desert landscapes. But not barren ones. Every canvas portrayed life in places most people overlook. Wildflowers growing between sharp rocks, resilient shrubs soaking in golden light, towering cactuses standing like guardians under a soft sky. She had painted the same landscape that nearly killed her, but transformed it into something beautiful, something alive. Maya noticed me staring and shrugged slightly. I don't want the desert to be just a scary place in my memory, she said. I want to understand it. Rebuild it. Rebuild. That was always her gift, seeing possibility where others only saw pain. Over time, the paintings covered the hallway walls, turning what had once been a sterile passage into a vivid gallery of resilience. Her therapist called it processing, called it courage. As for me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The constant tension, the obligation to attend family gatherings, to manage my mother's moods, to shield Maya from snide remarks, was gone. My phone no longer buzzed with passive-aggressive comments or reminders from my sister. Our home became peaceful in a way I didn't realize was possible. The restraining order sat folded in my desk drawer, untouched but still powerful. A boundary carved in legal stone. A month after the order was made permanent, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was an expensive set of art supplies Maya had once mentioned wanting. Beneath them was a letter, written on my mother's floral stationery. Apologies. Tears on paper. Sentences about regret and promises to change. Words about family and love and misunderstandings. I read it once, folded it neatly, placed it back into the box. Then I carried the package to my car, drove it to a donation center, and left it there without a second thought. Those supplies might help a young artist somewhere, but Maya would never need gifts born out of guilt or fear. When I came home, Maya looked up from her canvas. Who was that box from? No one important, I said honestly. She nodded, as if she already understood. One evening, months later, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, she spoke up unexpectedly. Do you ever miss them? She asked, her voice light but curious, as though she were asking about a distant memory. Thought about it. Not about the people they were, but about the roles they should have filled. I miss the idea of them, I said finally. I miss the version of a grandmother and aunt you deserve to have. But the real people, well, I don't miss the pain they brought. Maya nodded slowly, then said something that stayed with me. I feel safer now. That was all the confirmation I needed. Peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes peace is choosing absence. Sometimes it's choosing yourself. And the child who depends on you. So as I sit here telling this story to you, strangers, viewers, listeners, I'll end with a question that has lived in my mind ever since that day on the desert highway. How far should you go to protect your child from the people who share your blood? For me, the answer was simple. As far as necessary, even if it means walking away forever.